Good morning. I want to talk a little bit about leadership and the team, which is what God addresses so many times. In Ephesians 4, we'll be studying that today, so those of you who have your scriptures with you, go ahead and take a look. And those of you who are listening in at home, take a look at that sometime after we finish. But in terms of leadership, there are principles that we have to go by. And people, when you think of leadership, they go, oh, they think of the CEO or the general or something. And that's not necessarily true. And if we could get these lights off of me up here, I'd really appreciate that. That's really kind of getting my eyes here. But, sorry, a little moment there. But leadership, wherever you are, you're in leadership. Whether it's in your family, whether it's in your job, whether it's in the military, whether it's in school, there are principles you need to live by because you're leading your own life as well as others. And I'm reminded many times of when I talk of leadership in the team, because I have such a military background, and I speak to many people in here, we have a lot of veterans, our ROTC cadets are with us today. They understand what I'm going to talk about in terms of the military. We're actually in the army of God. So I see a contrast between the principles in the military that have guided this country, the greatest country that has ever been, and some people might dispute that, but they don't understand our history. They don't see us in terms of the morality of what we have in all the facets of our country and our communities. But God is always talking about team. He's always talking about, I send you out 2 by 2, etc., etc. It's not, no man is an island type thing with God. Your salvation is you and God. That is you in that one precious moment that you take in your lifetime to just say, okay, God, I do need you. Forgive me. There's something greater than me. I can't reach all of these things. Something's broken in me. I need what you're talking about. Come into my life. I open up the doors of my heart. And you enter into that and receive his nature. This is something that has been so misunderstood, is not talked about. You are born with the broken nature from Adam. God has made that clear. No one is righteous. No, not one. Only the Christ. You're born handicapped. That's why God loves you so much. He understands. You didn't do the original problem. You came as an offspring of that which was separate from God. The only way to reestablish yourself is to come under Jesus Christ. That can be disputed from now till eternity. It is true. And you are on a journey to find the truth, not a religious ideation. That Greek word in the scripture is about sozo, salvation. Sozo means sewn back together. We were ripped apart by Adam's disobedience and separation from God. We're sewn together. That natural nature can do good things. I mean, there's atheists out there that are kind, that are honest, that run orphanages. God's not talking about good works. He's talking about cleanliness. He's talking about holiness. He's talking about things we cannot get with an Adam nature. The inclusion of the God nature in you is the only way to reach the levels of love and forgiveness and kindness and generosity and integrity that God is talking about and that we need in every facet of our lives. This is a God-founded Christian country. But the principle is you don't have to be Christian to live here. But those original tenets came from Christian background. And to say we're not a Christian nation is an outright lie. We are a Christian nation. There's about 90-something% of people who believe that there is a God that are in this country. They believe in some Godhead. And I think we're down to like 75 or 80% that are Christian in that delineation. Wow, that's powerful. But how many are just Christian in name only? I see that more and more, but I am so encouraged when I see our young ROTC cadets. I am so encouraged when I work with the young cadets in the Air Force Auxiliary, the Civil Air Patrol program. I am so encouraged when I speak in the high schools in the history of Vietnam classes. Wow! These these young people are crying out for appropriate leadership. They're crying out for edges. They're crying out for some sort of sense of rules. There's got to be something here. They're growing up in a society that's almost leaderless. What you think is right is right. What you think is wrong is wrong. Can you imagine playing a football game with no playbook, no foul lines, no referee? That game would be chaos in seconds. And yet we're asking our young people to play the most important game of all, the game of life, without one structure, without one playbook, without one guideline. This is ridiculous. I'm going to go over some things today in terms of a comparison with the military. So many times when I talk about leadership in the team, and I teach a lot of this to our young people, and there are some principles, and I'm going to review some of them, and I want you to look at them. These are still some of the principles that are taught about leadership, especially in the military today, and how much they mirror the things of God. And I want you to take a look at that in terms of leaders. Leaders inspire others to achieve. I mean, what are we talking about achieving as Christians? Salvation, coming into the fullness of Jesus Christ. They don't just bark out commands. And it's amazing because we talk a lot about, Drew in our Sunday school has been on going over some of the principles from the John Maxwell Leadership Bible on leadership. So it's amazing how this stuff melts together sometimes. In the military, we talk about leaders who ensure that justice prevails. You don't play favorites and do things on a political basis. They establish programs that promote health and happiness to those that they command. And anyone in the military is used to the MW or we used to call it R&R or whatever, so it's morale, welfare, and recreation. There's a new term out called spiritual resiliency and resiliency. And they talk about what are your inner core values. And talking about this more and more in the military, you have to last long in a life. You have to be able to do these things for a sustained period of time, especially in the military. And we were talking about that in Sunday school. The mission of the military is significantly different than that of the librarians of America. The mission of the military involves lives, protection. It involves defense as well as offense. It involves so many things. So you have to have the highest moral code in your military. And our military in this country has fought other people who don't have as high a moral code. And they torture people in their POW camps and their own civilians and kill people and put their ammunition and their troops in the schools and the hospitals and in the houses of worship. Well, I'm not going to get into that particular portion of all these things, but the morality of it all is very important. Where are we? And in terms of excellent leadership, we talk about leaders stand for excellent leaders, absolute integrity and honesty in thought, word, and deed. If that isn't something that screams right out of the scriptures. And these are the principles that are taught in our military schools. They're taught to our cadets. They're taught to those in our ROTC program. But if you're trying to achieve these levels with a broken Adam nature, it won't work, which is why we're having some failures. Some failures with politicians, some failures in business, some failures in the military when bribery, lies, and corruption become the norm, become business as usual, politics as usual. Baloney. I hate that when I hear that comment. It is not politics as usual. It is not leadership as usual if it does not include absolute integrity and the highest standards of living. This absolute integrity, and not just for yourself, but to require that from those that are in your command. And then from relationships to money matters, you need to be squeaky clean. So don't just think it's the military, but these are the things that are talked about. Your personal life might not get you promoted, but boy, I tell you, as we've seen lately in some of the news, your personal life, what you're doing in the background behind closed doors, when that comes out in the light, which God said that it would, boy, that can get you in an awful lot of trouble. And it talks about some of these other principles that are in leadership. To know your people. Boy, God talks about community. God talks about helping each other. Don't forsake the gathering of yourselves together. See, God knows what he's talking about But we're giving these principles to those that are in the military. Meet with them frequently and regularly. Hello? How many people, there is no sense of community or family. They just show up, they fill up a bench, check off a box, I went to church, big deal. That old saying, it's not going to just knock it off with God if you're just sitting in a church. That's like sitting in a garage thinking it's going to make you a car. Sitting in a church isn't going to make you a Christian. Now, it should help you along the way, but you have to be the one involved. You have to be the one, not involved with the programs of the church, involved with the living God. Focus on areas that need to be improved. We're always talking to the military about that. Don't mess with what's working. And we talk about accountability in terms of these leadership principles. We talk about perfection is impossible, so you have to deal with it. That's why God says you have broken nature all in you and around you. That's why forgiveness is key. That's why wisdom is key. That's why all of the things that you need to deal with as a leader are key for you to have a God nature. So I see all these principles being taught about what you should do in the military, which is key for leadership in any facet of our community. Communication is vital. It is so important. You can't separate yourself out. It's so true. There's a lot of people, if you're disabled, you might have to look at a church service online. You might have to sit in your room or in a hospital room or a nursing home or something. You can't get to where it is. But don't think, oh, I can just watch something on TV or whatever. I got my internet in front of me here. When you're not in a community of believers, you're not going to be asked to do anything. You're going to sit there in your little living room with your own ideas, never challenged by somebody who might be a little unlovable, never being asked to help out with something with kids or pick up someone and bring them to church. You're never going to be challenged. You have to be challenged because your broken nature is still in there, and it's going to be your demise if you don't get the God nature in. And then once you get the God nature in, they're totally opposite. There's going to be a battle in there. I can remember one time years ago, so long ago, this church used to have benches and columns in it. And I was right over that area, and I was worshiping God, this song, we were going, oh, I love you, Lord, I love you, Lord. And from behind me, because that's where the entrance door is, behind me I heard someone's voice, and I'm like, ugh. I remember at that moment saying, God, how can I be so in love with you? How can I have given you my heart, and you have entered into me? And I'm in the middle of worship. And I hear someone's voice that's an irritant to me in my life. Wow. You have to have this in your life to find out you're not as holy as you think you are. You actually, in that moment, there was a little Adam nature phrase. Well, I got rid of that. Oh, God, forgive me. And that soul was in my face for 30 years until she passed. Now she's in the kingdom. Hallelujah. I'm still struggling down here. But you have to confront these things. Don't think it a punishment from God. You have to know how much your Adam nature is still alive in you, especially those that are in leadership positions and going into them. You better know who you are, and you better know you are not the perfect one. God is. And unless you're turning off that Adam nature, God calls it crucifying the flesh and not listening to the world and the flesh and the devil, and letting the nature of God rise. That is when the greatness of your leadership, whether it's in your home, in the military, in education, or any of these 7 mountains that are out there that's talked about, that have been taken over by the adversary, try and take them back for the Lord, in business. And look at the arts and the entertainment. Look at the garbage that's out there. The garbage that's hitting our young people. When I grew up, there wasn't this sexual garbage out there. It's totally infused into everything, books and movies. The language is so foul. 5-year-olds going, Matthew, in Walmart. Mm-hmm. There's no sense of family. There's no sense of help. There's no sense of community. There's no sense of purity. There's no sense of integrity. This is garbage that's infused into our society. How in the world did it get to be like that? Some people are more concerned about baby seals dying in Antarctica than they are with the 60 million abortions that have happened since the 70s. why I love to see godly leadership coming up. Not religious nuts that are running out there banging people on the head with the Bible, but those that are living lives that are so full of light, so full of integrity, so full of the power of God being released from them, that they stand out as different, as symbols of saying, I want to be like that. And especially those of you who are going to be in uniform really soon. And some of you have been, some of you are. There's little ones looking up to you and they're going, I want to be like you. What are they going to see? There's too many things that they're seeing. All they see is people with riches, a lot of cars, running around, drugs and women and all this garbage that's out there. Those are their models? You got to be kidding me. Excellent leadership lives by the core values. I teach core values all the time. They are the principles of God, really. I call it the stealth ministry many times. You know, I'll be sharing things from the scriptures. They're the truth of the day. You know, return a kind word with an unkind word is a really wise thing. It stops a lot of garbage. Excellent leadership. Again, don't be a know-it-all. There needs to be a humility in your leadership. Be open to ideas. Be open to correction. Be open to knowledge, something you don't know. And every one of us knows a know-it-all. Oh, they know everything about raising children. They know everything about, medicine. They know everything about, somebody called me yesterday, and the little kid was sick and screaming and crying, had a runny nose. They didn't know why they were crying, and they were babysitting for the kid. And, and I said, well, sometimes they're crying. They might have a little earache or something. Well, it was sad. This individual says, yes, but the mother says, that the baby's fine, doesn't really pay attention to the baby. And I'm not going to give the baby anything. The baby doesn't need any medicine or anything. You check the temperature. Find out what's going on. Say a prayer. What's going on here? There's so many times. Some people are such know-it-alls, you can't tell them anything. In that case, you better be doing the God love to them and praying for them, instead of hitting them over and over and over again, because they're a brick wall. Pray for God to soften that. Be decisive and not being wishy-washy. We talk about that in terms of having your group, whatever it is, big or small groups. Not, well, I don't know, maybe, whatever. Seek God. He is the author of all wisdom. And be consistent. Not good days and bad days. They say, oh, she's having a bad hair day. He's having a bad hair day. Pastor Mark, he's having a no hair day. He's out of that game, so it's okay. You never know, he never has a bad hair day. Well, ask his wife. She probably knows if he has a bad hair day or not. But anyway, in excellent leadership, be visible. Don't sit in the office. Get out with the troops. I'm always saying that to the chaplains. Look, the power of God and His presence needs to be out there. Don't sit in the air-conditioned base operations office with your boots on the desk, waiting for a problem to come in. We need to be out in the community. We need to be alive. We need to be vibrant and vital. I'm not talking about some holy roller. Be alive in your marriages. Be alive in your business. Be alive in your college. Golly, that's nothing but the Adam nature. That's nothing but the adversary. God is uplifting. God is encouraging. God is full of life. I'm an old lady, for crying out loud. I still have a little bit of life left. Jeez. Come on, guys. When you're full of the Spirit of God, you're going to have the power and strength of God. And also the wisdom to know when to lay it down. I was over at my personal trainer the other day. And I was on the edge of tears because there's certain things I can't do with my body anymore. And I'm sitting there going, hey, man, I'm telling you, I'm still dealing with a 25-year-old and a 72-year-old body. 25-year-old mind, 72-year-old body. We have a conflict here. I'm going to keep going to as far as I can, but I need God's wisdom to not go further. Oh, God, help me. Where are you alive? I mean, come on. So many Christians walk around, I can't. What kind of a life are you leading? So full of the optimism of God. There's more than what we have in this life. This is where sin is. This is where strife is. This is where the Adam nature is all over. You don't have to have that nature rule in you. Even in the midst of the storm, you can be built up. Even in the midst of the storm, God says you can keep going. You can have a joy inside even when everything and everyone around you isn't giving you joy. And I'm not talking about the happy Cheshire Cat grin garbage. I'm talking about a security inside that only God can give. And when people see that in leadership, they will follow you. What's the old saying? If you think you're a leader and there's no one behind you, you're just out for a walk. Leaders, excellent leaders, those at the highest moral code, will have people follow them. And another one, don't micromanage. Let those under you do their job. If they're right, then great, give them praise. If they're wrong, then have some correction, etc., etc. This micromanaging stuff, it's a power control thing. It comes from the Adam nature. It's not correct. I'm not talking about supervision. I'm not talking about training. I'm talking about you have to be the God of everything that's going on in your life. Do it this way, do it that way. I had to learn a long time ago in the military. When I'm going to do that job, it's going to be a powerful level of excellence. I thank God those principles are in there, even before I knew the Lord. How much more so He can use those gifts that He gave me when I'm led by God's Spirit. But you go to the fullest extent to get the job done. And when there are others that weren't doing that, I said, oh, you have to do this. Don't. There was one med tech came to me one time where I was an airback flight nurse, and he on purpose didn't like to do the work. He didn't want to do the work. He just always wanted, and everyone, because he was so sloppy, he didn't load up the things, he didn't tie the things down, they just didn't call on him to do it. So I met up with this guy, and I go, oh, you don't know how to do this? I'll be glad to help you. I want you on every single mission, every single time with me. Because this is how we're going to do it. So it's a leadership thing. Excellence. You can require it from others. Instead of saying, oh, forget it, they keep doing it wrong. Sometimes they do it on purpose, sometimes they don't know, just to get out of it. You're going to have that kind of wisdom, but that kind of ability to work with people that aren't necessarily the ones that you want to. So have high expectations, because if you don't, they won't. And I'm seeing a little change in our country where we're lowering the bar here. No, put it up here. Everybody gets a trophy. Oh, well, forget that. That's not a principle of God. You're clean, and you die clean in Jesus Christ. You get to be with Him. Not everybody. Can you imagine those who died with only the Adam nature, and that gets to be in the kingdom? All the argument and the lust and the anger all starts again up there? No way. God has said that final heaven and earth are going to be the treasures of His heart, those who have been made complete in Him. And He's given everyone an opportunity, even let the disobedience of Adam and Eve occur, so that He can show a better way. What a God we serve. What a God we serve. Integrate those core values into every aspect. Lead by example. Another thing, things will go wrong. Take responsibility. As was shared in terms of integrity and things. Writing up reports. Efficiency reports. Oh, you write good ones for your friends and bad ones for the ones you don't like. No. That is so destructive, whether it's a family, whether you're doing your income tax. You don't have to be some leader in the military. What about your income tax? What are you doing correctly or incorrectly on that? Golly. Things will go wrong, take responsibility. If you fail, take responsibility. Stand there. Sorry, my bad. What are you teaching your children? By their example, they're going to see what you're doing. If you have an excuse for everything, why it's not your fault, you say, I'm sorry, I did that. If you succeed, then give them praise that you succeeded. Now, I want to take a look at God's army, and you'll see such a comparison, but how much on a higher level. That's why I want to encourage our future leaders. I'm so encouraged myself when I see our young people, and I've met so many of them, wanting something better. They want structure. They want some rules, so to speak. And I like that. They want to do better. They want to excel. They want to get better. And I'm seeing more of a majority of that than some of the slobs that might be out there. But remember, the higher goal that God has in His army cannot be reached with the natural nature. That is a principle that has to be understood. And realizing that you're working with a lot of people who don't have the God nature inside. So you're expecting holiness to come out from someone that doesn't have holiness within? It isn't going to work. That's why you need to be the prayer warriors in every circumstance you are in. Whether it's family, whether it's business, whether it's military, education, arts, and it doesn't make any difference. You need to be what brings the Spirit of God to where you are and to be the prayer warrior in that. Now, we're going to talk about a unity of the Spirit for a few minutes in Ephesians, in the very first chapter. Talk about summing up that what we just said the military does. Walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you have been called. God really clarifies that and makes it so clear. He doesn't have he calls it his army. And people misunderstand that many times. He calls the body of Christ, where you're working together in unity. My right hand just doesn't run off and do whatever it wants. Now, in a disease process, sometimes it does. The musculature doesn't work. And Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, all sorts of things, cerebral palsy, these are conditions of the neuromuscular system. And they are a word picture of not having a unity of the Spirit, not having a unity of the body of Christ. This one's off doing this or whatever instead of working together for the whole. Now, they can't control that. That is a part of the cursed body and the cursed earth on the disease process here, because this ain't heaven. So God talks about a unity of the Spirit. He talks about coming together. He talks about how can we walk worthy of this calling. And in the scriptures, and in verse 2 of Ephesians 4 tells us, he says, with humility and gentleness. That is not some of the bravado that's out there today. Now, humble doesn't mean you walk with your head down at all. Humble means that you know you're gifted, but you know where the gifts come from, and you eagerly pursue, and you apply those godly gifts in whatever position that you're in. Humility and gentleness. Wow. What a couple of nice new words to put in there. And with patience. Our patience will not last as long as the nature of God's patience. Our patience will last until somebody ticks us off. Until something's not going to work right. Until we just get tired of this or whatever. That's why patience. So this is how we can get this done in terms of leadership. Showering forbearance with one another in love. And not that soupy, sappy, emotional love. That's part of our life experience, yes. But that's not the love that God's talking about. You have to read 1 Corinthians 13. And he tells us that love is what? Patient. Love is kind. Love is long-suffering. Doesn't hold wrong. It goes through a whole list of these wonderful things. It says love does not fail. So if you're looking for something that works, it's going to be love, the kind of love that God talks about. And you're not the boss, the bully, the king. And we talked about that earlier, that example that Dr. Shirley came up with. How the Lord is showing her that in terms of dog and cat theology. How amazing. The dog, I mean, if you could attribute that to the dog, and you can see activity. I had a cat, and I've had a dog. I don't have either now. I have too much job, and they die if I had to take care of them. But the cat owned the house. The cat did what it wanted, whenever it wanted. Didn't come when you called it. Just ate when it wanted. The cats rule, dogs rule. You know, the cat does everything, and it doesn't care what I provided for it. It is, like Shirley said, I provide everything for the cat. The cat thinks, oh, I must be God. The dog, on the other hand, doesn't care who you are, what you're doing. Will always come right to you. Will always love you and all this stuff, no matter whether you're fed it 3 times a day or once. It'll love you. It is so grateful. You provide, you care for it, you groom it and all this stuff. So it thinks you're God. So it's so amazing. This viewpoint is so prevalent in people. They think they're God. Instead of submitting to the great and wonderful God. So you're not the boss. You're not the king. God is. And in terms of the unity of the Spirit, being diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. We might want to circle that one to say that at weddings. you gotta tattoo that on your hand or print it on your mirror. Be diligent to preserve the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Unity, oneness. There's one body and one Spirit. And if you're run by the nature of God, the Spirit of God, that is what's going to rule. You will be able to inspire others. You're going to have that justice in the things that are called for. Just as you were called in one hope of your calling. See, this is a thread of unity. There is a oneness. Now, that's not going to work well in our community with those that aren't one with the Lord. And every one of you have gone to the store or got a cup of coffee or done whatever you've done. And you go to the cashier. Did you ever sense there's something there, there's a little smile or something like that? Sometimes I'll look at him and go, you must know the Lord. You got something a big smile, and they go, I do, yes I do. I said, well, that makes you my sister, that makes you my brother. It's just a moment in time. Sometimes there's a little bit of a oneness that's there. You just meet someone who knows and loves the Lord. You don't know them from Adam, so to speak. But you just feel a bond there. That bond is not your friendship. That's not your emotional love. You're caring for them. You don't even know them. There's something that bonds you. That's the unity that God's talking about. It's by His Spirit, not by your personal experiences. There's one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, and Father of all. Boy, talk about principles. We try and bring these to the military and to businesses. It doesn't work unless God is at the center of that. And he goes on. So I can't do that, whatever. Verse 7. But to each one of us, grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gifts. He gave gifts to men. He knows that that broken Adam nature isn't going to do it. So he has done this. And just like you have to look for that when you're in a leadership position, there are some people you're going to be leading that are extremely gifted. Line them up with their duties, with their gifts as much as you possibly can. Those might be God-given gifts. If you have an opportunity to pray with your people, pray with your family every day, get in the presence of God, have Him start your day. Golly, Pastor Mark gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning because he wants to go before the Lord. He reads his newspaper, has his oatmeal before he goes to work. Well, Shirley doesn't get up at 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes. Sometimes she does. Sometimes she's still been up. She hasn't got to bed yet because she's still working on things. But for years and years, he's told us the account of he'll go in and he'll just pray with him. You know, she can be half asleep. God's not depending on you being awake. He's depending on you being in His presence. That's where the power comes from. You men can pronounce a blessing on your household. You women can pronounce a blessing on your households. Pray with each other. Pray with your children. Mark prays with his workers before they go to work. He doesn't ask their permission. He's the leader. It's a private company, so he can do it. Now, if you're in a public setting, you can say, hey, over here, 7:15 every morning, we're going to have a little prayer time. It's optional. Anybody want to join me? My sister has done that for years as a school nurse. There's other teachers and people that come by and they have prayer. They start their day in prayer. There is no rule against that in this country. It used to be that we had prayer in school all the time. If somebody came along and decided to take that out, and you wonder why things are going wrong in today's world. You took God and prayer, Bible out of the school, and you wonder what's in the school now. Yeah, whatever. But God is giving gifts to people. Be aware of this. This is a God thing. This is a God nature. And He gave some as apostles, some as prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, the whole list. We have little portions of this in each one of us. You don't have to be trained and go to seminary to be able to share the gospel with someone. You can do that. Some have done that. You don't even have to go to school. God can call you. Now, some have enhanced that ability with training or whatever. And sometimes it's only our world that needs to look at that. Well, I tell you, we have missed so much because we've looked to each other instead of the Lord. Start with Him. And then we have a why question. Why is God doing all this? Why does God provide? Why does God share? Why does God do? Why does God give? For the equipping of the saints, just like He would in the military. Why do you do all the training? And it amazed me, because during our worship time, it was a little bit longer this morning. It was about 45, 50 minutes of praise. And our ROTC cadets stood right there the whole time, didn't sit down once. They're trained. They understand respect. They understand paying attention. They understand bodily self-discipline. I'm so excited that we can leave a legacy in their hands. This is so good. And they didn't even know that. They didn't. You don't know who's watching you. For the equipping of the saints for the work of service to the building up of the body of Christ. And how is that going to be done? Absolute integrity and honesty. And then for how long? Oh God, how long have we said that? How long, God, how long? Until we all attain to the unity of the faith, to the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. In verse 13, I have read that many a time. And I go, wow, that's been a long time. But God has shown that we are in the end times. Not like people have thought for years and years. We are in the end times. He is gathering his people together. He is returning. It is so powerful. There have been many that have gone on before us. And those of us that are still here, if you are alive when he returns, you're going to go be with him. There's a whole rest of this story. This is such a short time, and I've said this many times before. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Goes on and on and on. We think this is, oh, it's going to take forever to finish school. It's going to take, well, an hour ago I was going through nurses training, for crying out loud, it seems. Yet your whole life has happened. Your whole life, if you live to be 120 years old, is like this long. Beep, next. Right. That's it. So when you're suffering, going through all this stuff, God's up there saying, I know you are really angry with me, but I'm getting something done with someone else's heart in your suffering or your loss or your lack. And your life is only like this, and I know this hurts you, but it ain't very long, sweetheart. And I know you don't care for it right now, and you might be angry with me, but I know what I'm doing, and this is not long. Wow. In eternity. Yes. And some people are giving up an eternity with God for a few minimum pleasures on this earth. When your life is like that. You might want to think about it, people. You might want to think about it. And again, after all this, to what result? That we're no longer to be children. You're being brought up in the ways of power and conformity and self-discipline. And some of our precious young people out there today, they're overweight. They're 18 years old and they have high blood pressure and obesity and diabetes. They're not fit to serve in businesses, never mind in the military. What's going on? The lust of the pleasures and the lust of the flesh. We need to be aware the adversary is trying to kill all of humanity. He doesn't want any effects of God. And we're here as a counter to that. To what result? That we're no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by craftiness and deceitful scheming. Back in the old days, there wasn't anything but just like maybe 1 or 2 pages of a newspaper that you might read once a week. That's how you got information about what happened. When I was growing up, there were 3 channels on the TV. Most TV didn't start till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was off at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night with the Star Spangled Banner playing and a flag waving on your TV, your black and white TV. Yeah. Now it's 24-hour news and information cycle. You can sit there, you can turn your phone on right now and find out what's going on. But is it true? How are you going to find out what's true? I turn on this station, it tells me that happened. I turn on that station, it tells me exactly the opposite. And I go, what? You better be, make sure you're tied to the leg of the Lord so that you are enmeshed in truth. God, lead me by the Spirit as I hear what's going on out there. Let me be encouraged by you. I don't care whether you're voting or buying something. Help me, God, to be enmeshed in your wisdom so that I'm not tossed and turned. So that I can be decisive and not wishy-washy. No longer children, but speaking truth in love. Do not be afraid to speak truth in love. We're to grow up in all the aspects of Him, Christ, who is the head. Boy, I tell you, accountable and consistent. These are things that God wants us to be. But speaking truth in love. And it's not a matter of jamming stuff down people's throats. You ever try and feed a little kid that didn't want to eat their little baby food spinach? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can go like this and you go put that spoon in there and go. I mean, you try and force something down someone's throat. It isn't going to work. And it's the same thing with God. What are we doing? And just like that example that I gave a little bit ago, and then we'll finish up with this. I was had 5 years with the Army National Guard. I was a volunteer chaplain. It was in the Army, but through that process, through the Air Force Auxiliary, helping them out a little bit. And I was talking to one of the soldiers who was talking to me about his upbringing. He was brought up in the Netherlands. His family, his mom and dad were international business people, so he didn't really grow up here. He grew up in the Netherlands, and over there it's like neutral. There is a God, there isn't a God. There wasn't a spiritual background. And he was telling me about everybody's right and all sorts of truths, whatever you think it is. He was going on and on and on. The guy was like 6'7". And he's standing up on the sidewalk, and I'm standing down, so it makes me even shorter. And I remember tapping on his heart. And I'm going to tell you, I was wondering, all I said to him was, what if you're wrong? What do you think? I shot him with an M4. He stepped back like that. I never thought of that. He actually never, no one had ever said, what if you're wrong? Oh, that's all I said. I didn't say anything about God, or Jesus, salvation, prayer. I just said, what if you're wrong? From that point on, every Sunday that I had a service at that particular company, a company meaning Army in the company, Bravo company, he was there. He never asked any questions. He never asked for prayer. And I said, okay, God, you gotta lead me what to do. He always was, he was listening to more truth of God. God had stirred something in his heart. A few months after that, he moved up to the top of Florida, transferred to another unit, never heard from him again. But I am trusting God to have captured his heart. And by doing what? Just by listening to the Spirit of God and just saying, what if you're wrong? Speak the truth in love. Another cadet was talking to me, and we were out on a weekend activity, and we're out there, and they all sleep in their tents. I don't sleep in the tent anymore. I just sleep in the rack on my van. And he was telling me, so I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. And so he's asking me some questions. I was giving him some truth in love. And he said, you know, it's been really good talking to you. He said, I talked to a pastor a while ago, and when I told him that I was an atheist, he said, you're going straight to hell. I thought, well, that's a good way to start a conversation in love now, isn't it? No, what are you doing? Jesus never did that. He said, come follow me. He was gentleness personified, but he always spoke the truth in power and in love. That's what we're to do, and you can't do that with the Adam nature. It can't come out correctly. It's going to come out broken. You need to have the nature of God. And this is what we have. Yes, Jesus. From whom the whole body, being fitted and held together by that which every joint supplies. And some of us, you go along and get this joint, that joint, whatever. You need strength in those joints, and every movable part, every part of you spiritually needs to be strengthened by the Lord. And he goes on, the last part of that, in verse 16, he says, according to the proper working of each individual part. You are so important to get this straight with God yourself. If this is correct vertically, all the things you work on horizontally are going to be managed much better. It says each individual part, it causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. God's not talking about church growth. There's so many programs out there. God bless them. But if all you have is whitewater rafting and a program for every kind of group, singles and divorced and kids and this age, and if that's all you have, you just have fun and all this stuff, you might as well be a community organization. Go be the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and do whatever. We're talking about teaching truth in all of those areas. We need to make sure that we are teaching the truth in love as the growth of the body of Christ. In our leadership message, yes, we can do this. Go team. God bless you.